Parents immigrated to New York from India in 1969. So I was born, and I was born in New York. So I'm born and bred American.
Okay.
But my parents are from India, and they used to send me back to India every summer. So I spent sort of half my childhood going back and forth between Bombay, where their family is, and New York, where we lived. Around poverty and inequality and things like that. And I always wanted to write, although what I was supposed to do is be a doctor, because both my parents are physicians. And when I went to college, I was pre-med for a while, but discovered, and that quickly sort of just became like my passion. And slowly over time, I went into magazines and I worked in book publishing companies, and I kept writing all along about politics and healthcare, and I did a lot of stuff around women's issues for a while. But started writing about medicine and public health issues after I went freelance about 8 years ago, and started writing full time. And that was sort of bringing together lots of these things, lots of these issues that had been sort of concerning me for years. Poverty, medicine for my parents, and inequality between societies, and just looking at sort of different areas of social life where we're trying to work together, trying to cooperate together and make a better society, but sort of not quite getting there. So those kinds of challenges are what interest me, as trying to get at the answer by doing interviews, doing reporting, doing lots of documentary research, lots of archival research. So, and then I'm bringing all of that together to answer these big questions. So the thing I really strive for in my work is not to have one message. I really want to tell a big story and let the readers come to their own conclusions. Actually, my third book, which I wrote after this and which is coming out in July, which is about malaria, sort of really follows on from The Body Hunters. It's called The Fever, and so those two books are sort of a piece. The oil book was a little different. I mean, I think it was the same issues that drove me to it, but in terms of doing the research, I mean, the kind of people that you have to talk to do a book about oil, and the kind of people you have to talk to do a book about drug development, it's just very different. What I tried to do is sort of look at the intersection between politics and science in all of my books. So I talk to scientists, but I am also looking at the political story behind why they're doing what they're doing and how the products of science are used politically. For my new book, I reported on this malaria breakout that had occurred in Panama, in this little village, and I had met this malaria scientist in Panama City, and he said that there had been this horrible epidemic and people died, and it was this drug-resistant strain of very dangerous malaria that had broken out there. This was right near the Panama Canal, so it kind of interested me, So we drove down there together, and you drive out of Panama City over these hills, and it's very pretty, and and it takes about 2 hours. And then we park the car, and there's just, side of the road, there's just like this sort of, palm thatched sort of hut. There's a couple guys there who came out dressed very officially and looked at my passport really carefully. And, we had to sit down and I get a cold drink while we're waiting. And I don't know what they were doing. They had no machines or anything, or, they were just like studying it really carefully. And I'm looking around, there's nothing here. There's just like this lake, and I'm like, where was this breakout? There's no people here. And he's like, okay. So we get the passports, and then he leaves me behind there. We go up the steep track. It's all jungle. You can't see anything. You go up the steep track, and you get out, and there's just this clearing, and there's about 300 people living in these what they call ranchos, which are hand-built structures that basically it's just a thatch roof with posts, and they have hammocks in there, and there was roosters and parrots, and there was kids walking around and stuff, and it was this traditional Kuna community, and they had this horrible malaria epidemic there, and you could see why, because there's no hot water, there's no water, there's no electricity, there was hardly any furniture even. I mean, these people were living like they had for hundreds of years, but this was just right. Literally 2 hours away from Panama City, which is a completely cosmopolitan place. Anyway, to get back to what you're thinking, why is she
No,
talking
no,
about
no.
this?
I'm totally intrigued. Like, wow, this woman goes on adventures.
So anyway, I talked to the people there and I had an interpreter and I sort of put together this story about this malaria epidemic that had occurred there. About a year later, I was back in the States and I was invited to speak to some students at it was a writing conference. And I was telling them about this. And afterwards they were like, well, why did you have to go there? I mean, don't they have like, couldn't you Skype them or, couldn't you like, just get the cell number and find out more? So, and I mean, there was just no sense that there are at least 1 billion or maybe 2 billion people in this world who don't have electricity at all. They are not part of our whole world. So how do you reach those people? How do you get their stories? You still have to go out there on foot, find them and talk to them face to face.